All right, welcome everyone. So today I wanted to talk about Ashton Kutcher and the recent human trafficking speech he gave. Now, before we start, I want to say that I'm not accusing Ashton Kutcher of anything because there isn't any direct evidence here. All I'm doing is presenting a lot of interesting and circumstantial evidence that people need to take into account and question before making any type of conclusion on this subject. I also want to thank the writer of the Steemit article that I'm going to link in the show notes discussing the Ashton Kutcher human trafficking angle. So a lot of the credit goes to him. He's the one who came up with a lot of this info, or maybe it's a woman, I'm not sure. So I'll link that. Check that out. Give it an upvote if you have a Steemit account, because this person does deserve a lot of the credit here. I'm just trying to echo out what this person said and give my own perspective on it. Now, a couple of things to take into account before we go a little deeper. Now, first off, while this isn't necessarily any smoking gun, he's a former teenager underwear model that's very connected to Hollywood. And he's also very connected to the tech industry, as he has a startup company that has been an investor in many prominent tech companies that have gone on to make a lot of money. And to be early investors in this, usually you're some type of insider. So he has an established history of being involved in tech companies. He's also been connected to the Kabbalah Center, which has its own share of controversies that I'm not going to get into, but just some interesting notes before we start. Now, last week he testified in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and John McCain on the subject of human trafficking. Now, the mainstream media praised him for giving this emotional speech on what they referred to as modern slavery. And, what he said, on the surface is good. Human trafficking is a problem we need to address. So there's nothing wrong with him addressing this. It needs to be addressed. And many in the alternative media were very quick to throw their support behind him without really questioning where all this came from. So, as I said before, this is, it's a good thing to be talking about it. But the question that needs to be asked is, why all of a sudden is Ashton Kutcher the face of international human trafficking? Why has he been bestowed upon as the guy who's going to help come in and save this? Now, it's important to remember that we always should question the narrative that we're given, especially since recently the independent media has heavily exposed the inner workings of human trafficking. And this has especially been done by George Webb, who deserves a lot of the credit in this area. We also know that the powers that be want to get ahead of this before it gets out of control, because it would expose too much if it all came out. So they have to look like they're fighting it to appease a lot of the people who are calling for some type of action on this. I always use this quote, but as Vladimir Lenin once said, the best way to control opposition is to lead it ourselves. Because if they didn't get ahead of this, it could bring so many people down, because a lot of them are involved in this. So, going to the particular human trafficking angle in Ashton Kutcher, there's a lot more here than meets the eye. Ashton Kutcher and his ex-wife started a company/foundation called Thorn, which has been described as digital anti-trafficking software. What's interesting is that there are many big tech firms backing this company and supporting them with money and resources, such as Facebook, Google, and Palantir, just to name a few. But there's many more. If you do some digging, what you'll come to find out is that the CIA was intimately involved in giving seed money to many of these companies, such as Facebook, Google, Palantir. So essentially, this means either they are front companies for the CIA, which we know they do, or at least they're involved in some way or another, especially in the surveillance and the tracking of everything, such as smart cities. We know the CIA and the NSA are heavily involved in surveillance, and it's pretty clear that Google and Facebook are very intimately tied in with that. So if you follow George Webb's research, he talks about Thorn being this new social justice front for Palantir. Now, if you don't know about Palantir, it's basically a data mining surveillance software that takes in a lot of data, like tons and tons of data, and kind of filters it and puts some type of structure to it. It creates profiles on people, on institutions, and it establishes different connections that these people have. So if you follow George Webb's research, he talks about Thorn being this new social justice front for Palantir. After Peter Thiel, the founder of Palantir, was outed as many people found out that the NSA was using Palantir to spy on everyone. So a lot of people became very suspect on Palantir. Basically, and Palantir has been claiming for a while to be fighting human trafficking. You can go to their website and find this. But since they've been outed as a tool for government surveillance, people aren't really so quick to believe the social justice front. So if I understand this correctly, and it makes sense, George Webb's basically talking about how Thorn is this new face for getting money to Palantir so they can monitor human trafficking. This makes sense since a lot of times they mask their real agenda with some type of social justice front to make it look like they're doing good. Oh, we're spreading democracy, but really there's a lot more ulterior agendas in place there. So since Palantir was kind of outed, they need this new company to step in and kind of be the front company but really money's funneling back. Now there's a few other data points here to note. Ashton Kutcher is a board member at the McCain Institute. And what's interesting about that is that he was giving a speech to John McCain and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but John McCain was also present, and he's been on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee before. So they're giving a talk to John McCain, yet they're all on the board of McCain Institute. The man sitting behind Ashton Kutcher is Ernie Allen, and he's also a board member at the McCain Institute, and also happened to be the CEO of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the NCMEC, which has its own interesting connections that I'm not going to go into here, but I will drop a link. Now, there's no direct connections necessarily, but there are a lot of weird circumstantial evidence and a lot of things. Often we find that the people who are supposed to be stopping these dark networks and dark, dark aspects of, like human trafficking and drug trafficking are usually the ones that are doing it themselves. The fox is guarding the henhouse. One thing to also note is that Ernie Allen also has been outspoken on the dangers of cryptocurrencies and the dark web. So another interesting aspect, not a smoking gun, but just interesting. The woman who speaks after Kutcher is named Elisa Massimino, who is on the board of trustees at the McCain Institute, along with David Petraeus, the head of the CIA. And what's interesting about all this is that at the press conference, Ashton Kutcher is basically asking for money to fund from the government to fund this public-private partnership with Thorn. He claims that the Department of Homeland Security had to come to him since they didn't have the capabilities themselves to stop human trafficking. And that's basically his argument that, well, if the Department of Homeland Security can't even solve this, you give us money, we'll help them solve it, as if he has this software that the Department of Homeland Security and NSA don't have. So somehow this underwear model, Hollywood insider, has this software. To me, it sounds a little fishy if you ask me. Another small note is that, and this is not really anything in particular, but it's weird. If you watch the video, you see the woman behind him smirking the whole time and smiling. And it's weird because given the topic of human trafficking, you would think that's a very serious issue. Yeah, this woman's smirking the whole time. So those are kind of all the data points here. And if you think about it, it does make some sense. Why all of a sudden is this underwear model, Hollywood insider who's invested in 10 companies, now the face of human trafficking, right as it's been talked about and exposed in the independent media for the last several months? It seems like they're trying to get ahead of this, and they're trying to use Kutcher and his foundation, Thorn, to funnel money in to Palantir or other organizations so they can kind of keep the lid on human trafficking. That way they can monitor it all and really not let it be exposed. They can track everything. And I wanted to leave you with a quote from the Steeman article that I thought was, kind of sums it all up very well. If we're to take Mr. Kutcher and his theatrics seriously, he asks us to believe that the Department of Homeland Security called a former underwear model, the guy from the movie Dude, Where's My Car, and the TV show Punk'd for help as a last line of defense to combat human trafficking. ... Right. And I think that's so true. And look, we don't know for sure here, but it does seem rather naive that the government and its vast surveillance network can't stop human trafficking or track what's going on. They can track almost anything these days. So to me, it seems like they're, again, trying to get money from the taxpayers to fund their Palantir or whatever, the software to kind of, guard human trafficking to some extent, because we know there is some involvement there. So just wanted to bring up those points. Drop a comment with your own thoughts on this. I know it's a kind of a touchy subject. There's no easy answer, and we don't know for sure. Ashton Kutcher could be getting played. There could be more to this. We don't know, but I think it's important for us to at least acknowledge that there might be something more to this than what meets the eye, and we shouldn't. And the government and the deep state often, leads the opposition. They pretend like they are the ones fighting against what we want to fight against, yet it's really a disguise. So we need to be very, very hyper vigilant about this and who we trust to lead our movements. I don't know if Ashton Kutcher and Thorne is the right person or foundation to be leading this. It seems like this might be a trap. So thanks a lot for listening. Give it a like. Check out thelastamericanvagabond.com.